I was 16 years old when 3 songs in a row on FM radio totally captivated me. These were the first 3 songs on the flip side of the Moody Blues album, To Our Children's Children's Children. The music ignited something in me, an incredibly deep yearning that had suddenly, as it seemed, come out of nowhere, surging forth from hitherto buried depths. It was, in some sense, a religious experience, more real and vital to me than anything else. And nothing's changed. Years later, if I listen to Gypsy, Eternity Road, and Candle of Life by the Moody Blues, I'm transported into that same transcendental realm of beauty and meaning. A taste for the infinite was awakened then. It was a taste and feel for a level of spiritual experience that went far beyond anything I'd ever felt at my local church or anywhere else for that matter. Years later, while studying at the Master Yoga Academy in La Jolla, California, my teacher described human beings as possessing what she called an innate yearning for transcendence. And I thought to myself that is absolutely so. That we are the bearers of some kind of built-in capacity to perceive a deeper world that far transcends this transitory one. In certain grace-filled moments, we absolutely know that this world is not all there is, and that deeper, eternal dimensions are forever calling out to us. In such an illumined state, you can feel at once both inspired and yet torn apart. But you wouldn't trade this heightened level of awareness, however painful, for anything else, for there's a fulfillment in it greater than any other kind of fulfillment. Krishnamurti described this kind of awakening as what he called the awakening of intelligence, which goes far beyond the common understanding of intelligence as being merely clever or smart. The experience is to go beyond everyday consciousness to a domain of intelligence, the awareness of which is related to the activation of a certain inner faculty of perception. And when this inner faculty turns on, one exclaims in response, "Once blind, now I see. Once lost, now found." Well, that inner domain of intelligence has often been called the higher or deeper mind. About this illumination, the Irish poet-philosopher John O'Donoghue exclaims, "The search begins and you can never go back. From then on, you are inflamed with a special longing that will never again let you linger in the lowlands of complacency and partial fulfillment." Soren Kierkegaard asks in his fragments, how does the learner come to realize an understanding? And answers that the acquisition of understanding is related to a leap and a risk. Kierkegaard is emphasizing that something more is required than merely to recite the creeds of the church or to go through the motions of the religious life. It's the plunge, that's what's required, of one's entire being into transcendental depths, a leap and a risk, what Professor Thomas Burtnow calls the radical opening of oneself from complacency into a new poignant consciousness. Now, there are many educators today whose conviction it is that there's no place for this quality of intelligence that I'm describing. Or frankly, they don't even know enough about it to reject it, for such an understanding is not even a reference point for them. The one thing, says Burtnow, that modern educators, including modern college and university educators, know best is that faith, defined here as awakened intelligence, has no place in education, which is, I think, tragic, for this awakening to intelligence should actually be the highest point of reference in education, in fact, the very goal of education. For what better sight than for a teacher to see, than to behold her students on fire with awakened, inquiring minds? Krishnamurti describes the awakened, intelligent mind in this way. An intelligent mind is a mind which is not satisfied with explanations, with conclusions, but is an inquiring mind, a mind that is watching, learning, studying. Such an inspired mind says Krishnamurti, is willing to rebel, to go against the whole social structure in order to find out what God is or to discover the truth of anything. Today, sadly, an education is about everything except what I'm emphasizing here. And so what we have today is a society of uninspired, smoothed out human beings, robotic members of a collectivistic herd who with one accord live in the gray zone of political and social correctness. A massive herd without intelligence and without faith. Well, it was George Orwell who envisioned just such a scenario in his book, 1984, where he described what a society would look like that had dispensed with this level of deep knowing. Look around anywhere and everywhere. His prophecies have been fulfilled. Now, the contrast to the smoothed out effect of a deficient education is the experience of Martin Lings, a former student of C.S. Lewis, who once heard Lewis hold forth on the subject of the awakening of intelligence. In his lecture, Lewis described the medieval understanding of the human soul and its faculties. I can see him now and hear him now, says Lings, as Lewis described the faculties of the soul as arranged in a hierarchy. Said Lewis, the highest faculty of the soul is called in Latin intellectus, which can be translated as intellectual intuition. Now, what's particular about intellectus or intellectual intuition, this highest faculty of the soul, is that the intellect is not for things of this world. Thus, prior to its activation, this capacity for spiritual realization lies dormant in the soul, covered over, buried by worldly preoccupations and concerns. This capacity, which resides at the center of the human being, is therefore darkened, but can be awakened through purification practices or by a surprising dose of grace, which is what I think C.S. Lewis meant by being and experiencing surprised by grace. Well, that's the awakening of intelligence. Now, upon understanding Lewis's message, Martin Lings exclaimed, "This was for me like a flash of lightning, for I had never heard of the intellect in its true meaning. It was something wonderful, and in a sense I have never recovered." John O'Donohue says about it, "The eternal, the sense of the eternal, makes you urgent. You are loath to let compromise or the threat of danger hold you back from striving towards the summit of fulfillment. Indeed, you are never the same again."